"Don't worry, my boys. Grandpa will find a way." Elias's hoarse voice, torn by hunger and pain, echoed through the gloomy galleries of the Castle of Shadows. His grandsons, Tomei and Lucas, burned with fever, their small bodies trembling with cold on the damp, treacherous floor. Expelled from everything, with death lurking in every shadow of that forgotten place, Elias had made a promise that there, in those ruins, they would find salvation. But with each weak breath from Lucas, despair tightened its grip. He needed a miracle. His eyes, clouded with tears and exhaustion, swept the darkness when a pale glow, coming from a crack in the ancient stones, revealed something that made him freeze, and what he discovered promised to rewrite everyone's destiny. The pale glow, almost a whisper of light in the oppressive darkness, was a silent invitation, a faint promise. Elias, his heart beating erratically in his aged chest, dragged himself towards the crack, hope, long dormant, beginning to awaken. His calloused, trembling fingers fumbled at the cold, damp stone, feeling the ancient roughness of the castle. The crack was not natural. It looked like a poorly disguised opening, a secret guarded by time. With an effort that cost him a muffled groan, he pushed aside the slab that concealed it, revealing a narrow, dark passage that descended into the depths of the earth. The smell of mold and damp earth rose, but for Elias, it was the scent of possibility. "My boys," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion and weakness. "Grandpa will try." The descent was treacherous, with uneven, slippery steps covered by centuries of dust and debris. Elias descended cautiously, every muscle in his body protesting, but the image of Tomei and Lucas, pale and feverish, was the fuel that propelled him. He clung to the stone walls, his body bent until his feet touched a flatter floor. The darkness there was almost total, a heavy blanket enveloping him, but the faint glow from the crack above still guided him. His eyes, already adapted to the gloom, began to discern shapes. Piles of rubble, broken furniture, spiderwebs that looked like ancient shrouds. It was a forgotten cellar, a tomb of memories. Breathing heavily, Elias began to rummage through the debris, his hands getting cut on sharp edges and rotten wood. He didn't know what he was looking for, only followed a primitive instinct, a blind faith that the glow was not in vain. His gaze swept the space until, under a pile of stones and planks, something caught his eye. A rectangular outline, dark and heavy. With superhuman effort, he pushed the stones, dragged the planks, and there it was, a wooden chest, reinforced with rusty iron straps, its clasp corroded by time. A mix of exhaustion and euphoria overcame Elias. He knelt, his hands trembling as he tried to open the chest. The stubborn clasp gave way with a sharp creak, revealing the interior. There was no gold, no glittering jewels, just a tangle of yellowed parchments and a thick book bound in faded leather. For an instant, a pang of disappointment hit him. Gold could buy food, medicine, but as he touched the parchments, he felt a different texture. They were maps, detailed and ancient, their fine lines drawing landscapes he didn't recognize. And the book. It was a diary, its pages filled with elegant, faded handwriting. Elias picked up the diary with reverence, feeling the weight of history in his hands. His fingers, still trembling, opened the first page. The words, though ancient, began to unfold before his tired eyes. They were accounts of an underground thermal spring, a place of legendary healing, and a fertile, isolated, untouched field hidden deep within those lands. A new flame, stronger than the glow from the crack, ignited in Elias's chest. It wasn't gold, but it was something far more precious, the promise of life, healing, and a future for his grandsons. He pressed the diary against his chest, a solitary tear tracing a path down his weathered face. That forgotten cellar was not a tomb, but a cradle of hope. Elias clutched the diary to his chest, the words echoing in his mind like an ancient, powerful chant, the promise of healing, of life, of a future for his grandsons. The exhaustion that had weighed on him for so long seemed to diminish, replaced by a feverish energy. He needed to return to Tomé and Lucas, to give them this hope, even if they were too weak to understand it. The way back through the narrow, dark passage now seemed less daunting, more a challenge to be overcome than an insurmountable obstacle. With the diary firmly tucked under his arm and the maps rolled in his other hand, Elias, with renewed vigor, began the ascent. Each uneven step was a reminder of his age and his pains, but each image of the boys' pale faces was an impetus, a reason not to give in. When he finally emerged from the crack, the castle's cold air hit him with renewed force, but he barely felt it. His eyes swept the gloomy hall, searching for the small, huddled bodies. There they were, Tomé and Lucas, still trembling beneath the few rags that covered them. Elias's heart tightened with a familiar ache, but now there was a glimmer of light piercing through it. He dragged himself to them, kneeling beside Lucas, who coughed weakly, his tiny chest rising and falling with difficulty. With a trembling hand, Elias touched his grandson's forehead, feeling the feverish heat that seemed to consume the small body. "My angels," he whispered, his voice choked. "Grandpa found a way. A place where water heals, where the earth bears fruit. You will be well, I promise." Tomé, who was a little more awake, opened his clouded eyes and looked at his grandfather with an expression of weariness and confusion. Elias smiled, a weak smile, but full of unwavering determination. He carefully unfolded one of the maps, its yellowed edges rustling softly. The faint light entering through the castle's cracks was insufficient, so he fumbled for a piece of wood and a scrap of cloth to light a small fire, something that could offer a little warmth and clarity. The flickering fire danced, casting ghostly shadows on the walls, but illuminating enough for Elias to examine the map's details and the diary's pages. The notes spoke of an arduous journey, of hidden trails, and a secret cave that led to the thermal spring. The fertile field, described with such fondness in the ancient pages, seemed like a distant paradise, an almost unattainable dream. Elias traced the path with his wrinkled finger, feeling the weight of responsibility. How would he take his grandsons, so fragile, along such a dangerous path? Fear threatened to grip his heart again, but he pushed it back with the strength of love. There was no alternative. They wouldn't survive there in those icy ruins. He needed a plan, and fast. The diary also mentioned some secret passages within the castle itself, shortcuts that could shorten the journey or offer temporary refuge. Elias knew that every minute was precious. He caressed Lucas's fine hair, who was now sleeping fitfully. That castle, which once seemed like a tomb, now revealed itself as a labyrinth of secrets. A challenge Elias was determined to unravel with all his soul. He had promised a new home, a sanctuary, and now, armed with the knowledge of the ancients, he would make that promise a reality, stone by stone, step by step, driven by faith and the overwhelming love he felt for his grandsons. Night advanced, but for Elias, the darkness was being dispelled by the light of a new hope. Elias spent the rest of the night poring over the parchments and the diary, the flickering light of the small fire casting dancing shadows on the icy walls. Every line on the map, every note in the ancient handwriting, was a piece of a vital puzzle. He traced the routes with his wrinkled finger, identifying a path that seemed more promising, a series of secret passages that, according to the diary, led to a less exposed exit from the castle, shortening the initial journey. The thought of moving Tomé and Lucas, so fragile, through those dark, unknown corridors squeezed his heart. He looked at his grandsons, asleep in a feverish slumber, their faces pale and thin, and the pain of their vulnerability struck him with renewed force. How could he carry them, protect them, through such an ordeal? A faint moan from Lucas brought him back to reality. Elias approached, kneeling and offering a little water in his cupped hands. Lucas barely managed to swallow, his throat dry and sore. Tomé, though a little more awake, was equally exhausted, his eyes heavy. Elias's voice was a soft murmur as he told them about the magical place, the water that healed and the earth that nourished. He knew they didn't understand the words, but he hoped they would feel the strength of his promise, the overwhelming love that propelled him. Dawn brought with it an even more intense cold, but also a renewed clarity in Elias's mind. He couldn't wait. Every minute was a battle against time, against the illness consuming his grandsons. The diary mentioned that one of the secret tunnels, besides leading to an alternative exit, also housed a small storage room, used by the ancient inhabitants in times of siege. There might be something there that could help them. Blankets, perhaps, or even a rudimentary cart for transport. With the diary and maps carefully tucked into his ragged coat, Elias stood up. His bones cracked in protest, a symphony of aches that seemed to echo his age and weariness, but determination was stronger than pain. He needed to prepare the way. The crack that had led him to the cellar was just one of the castle's many secret passages. The map indicated a hidden door behind a torn tapestry, a few meters from where the boys were. With hesitant steps, he went to the wall, fumbling at the cold stone until he found the rough texture of the tapestry. He pulled it aside, revealing an almost imperceptible crack in the masonry. With a firm push, a section of the wall silently swung inward, opening a narrow, dark passage. The air there was stagnant and heavy, smelling of damp earth and centuries of oblivion, an atmosphere that seemed to suck away sound itself. Ildeus lit a small piece of wood he had found, turning it into an improvised torch. The flickering flame illuminated a winding corridor, wider than the cellar crack, but equally intimidating. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. It was a dangerous path, full of uncertainties, but the only hope they had left. He needed to explore, find the storage room, and if possible, some means of safely transporting the boys. Before entering, he turned to Tomé and Lucas, who watched him with half-open eyes, a mix of fever and childlike curiosity. "Grandpa will be right back, my loves," he promised, his voice choked with emotion and the magnitude of the task. He knew that what he was about to do would require every ounce of his strength, but the image of his grandsons, the promise of life the diary offered, was a beacon in his darkness. With a last look at them, Elias slipped into the darkness of the tunnel, the torch trembling slightly in his aged hand, carrying with him the hope of a future that, though still distant and uncertain, now appeared painfully real and possible, a ray of light in the abyss of despair. Elias entered the passage, the dense, cold air enveloping him like a damp cloak. The improvised torch flickered, casting dancing shadows that distorted the rough stone walls, transforming each protrusion into a lurking monster. The smell of earth, mold, and dampness was suffocating. The tunnel's silence, broken by his shuffling steps and ragged breath, was almost deafening. Every step was an act of faith, a battle against the fear that tried to take root in his heart. He felt the weight of centuries in those stones, the history of past lives echoing in every crack of the rock. His tired eyes swept the surroundings, searching for any sign of the storage room mentioned in the diary. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, winding and treacherous, with an uneven floor under his feet. In some sections, water trickled down the walls, forming slippery puddles. Elias fumbled at the stones, his body bent with exhaustion, leaning his hand against the wall for balance. The image of Tomé and Lucas, fragile and dependent, was a beacon guiding him through the darkness and discouragement. He could not fail, not after having found the promise of a future. After what seemed like an eternity, the corridor opened into a slightly wider space. The torch revealed piles of objects covered by torn tarpaulins and thick dust. It was the storage room. A shiver of hope ran through Elias. With trembling hands, he removed the tarpaulins, revealing what time had preserved. There were empty boxes, rusty tools, and to his surprise and relief, some wool blankets, dusty and smelling of storage, but still offering warmth. He carefully shook them out, imagining the comfort they would bring his grandsons. But what caught his attention was a small wooden handcart, sturdy though damaged, and with a stuck wheel. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. With a groan, Elias tried to move the wheel, which creaked. He searched among the tools, finding a pot of dried grease. With patience and strength, he lubricated the axle, and the wheel, though still stiff, began to turn. A weak but genuine smile lit up his face. It was a sign, a small victory amidst adversity. He also found a cloth bag containing some dried roots and a handful of grains, perhaps forgotten for centuries. It wasn't much, but it was food, something to give them strength for the journey. Elias took the blankets, the bag of food, and pulled the cart out of the storage room, back into the winding corridor. The task of taking the boys through there would be arduous, but now he had the means. His shoulders ached, his legs trembled, but the determination in his eyes was unwavering. He imagined Tomé and Lucas nestled in the blankets, inside the cart, safe and warm. The vision filled him with overwhelming tenderness. He needed to be strong for them, to be the pillar that would support them. The way back seemed longer, but the burden he carried, not just the objects, but the new hope, propelled him. Every step was an act of love, a silent vow that he would do the impossible to see his grandsons healed and happy. The torch's light, once a weak point, now seemed to shine with the intensity of his renewed faith, illuminating not only the tunnel, but the path to a future that, for Elias, was no longer a dream, but a palpable promise. He was returning to his boys, bringing not gold, but the promise of life. Elias emerged from the secret passage, the improvised torch trembling in his hand, illuminating the rudimentary cart and the dusty blankets he dragged. The air of the main hall, though icy, felt like a relief after the suffocating dampness of the tunnel. Every muscle in his body protested, but the sight of Tomé and Lucas, still huddled on the floor, gave him renewed strength. He hurried, his shuffling steps echoing in the castle's silence, until he reached his grandsons. "My loves, Grandpa is back," he whispered, kneeling with difficulty. His eyes, moist with weariness and relief, fixed on the boys' pale faces. Lucas coughed weakly, a sound that tore at Elias's heart. With trembling hands, he unfolded the blankets, shaking off the dust and the smell of storage, and carefully wrapped them around the fragile bodies. The warmth of the wool, however faint, was a promise of comfort. Tomé opened his eyes, a flicker of recognition and a hint of hope in his clouded gaze. Elias smiled, a smile he could barely sustain, but one that carried all the love of his being. "Come on, my brave ones. Grandpa found a cart for you. We're going to the healing spring, to the land that awaits us." With tenderness and an effort that almost made him faint, Elias lifted Lucas first, his body light as a feather, and laid him in the cart, nestling him in the soft blankets. Then, with the same tenderness, he did the same with Tomé, settling him beside his brother. The boys, though weak, seemed to feel the affection in his touches, and a faint sigh of relief escaped Lucas. Elias covered them with a third blanket, ensuring they were as warm as possible. He picked up the bag of dried roots and grains he had found. "Eat a little, my angels. We need strength for the journey." He crushed one of the roots between his fingers, offering small pieces to the boys. Lucas, with difficulty, managed to chew a little, his eyes fixed on his grandfather. Tomé, a little stronger, ate a bit more, the faint energy returning to his eyes. Elias felt a pang of hope. Every crumb was a victory, While the boys ate, Elias picked up the diary and maps again, unfolding them in the flickering firelight. The path was long and uncertain, full of challenges. The first part of the journey would be through more secret passages, which would lead to a less exposed exit from the castle, as the diary indicated. He traced the route with his finger, imagining every turn, every obstacle. Fear, a constant shadow, tried to creep in, but Elias pushed it back with the image of his grandsons, now a little more comfortable in the cart. "We'll make it, my boys," he murmured, more to himself than to them. "We'll find our sanctuary." He pressed the diary against his chest, feeling the strength of the ancient words. That castle, once a symbol of misfortune, now harbored the seed of a new beginning. The journey would be dangerous, but Elias's faith, fueled by unconditional love for Tomé and Lucas, was a shield against hopelessness. He checked the cart one last time, adjusting the blankets, making sure the boys were safe. The torch still burned, but time was essential. Every minute that passed was another minute the illness had to corrode the little life left in his grandsons. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the icy air fill his lungs. It was time to leave. With a last look at the gloomy hall, he gripped the cart's handle, determination etched into every line of his aged face. The future, though still a mystery, lay ahead, and he was ready to face it. Step by step for his boys, Elias gripped the cart's handle. The creak of the wheels echoed in the castle's silence. With effort, he pulled Tomé and Lucas into the darkness of the secret passage. The icy, dense air, laden with damp earth and oblivion, enveloped them. The improvised torch flickered, casting shadows on the stone walls. Every step was a battle. The uneven ground, sprinkled with stones and puddles, made progress slow and dangerous. Elias felt the weight of the cart and the fragility of his grandsons. Lucas coughed weakly, and Tomé whimpered softly, nestling into the blankets. Elias paused to adjust them, caressed their foreheads, whispering, "We're almost there, my angels. Grandpa is taking you to a place where the sun shines and the water heals." Faith was his shield against despair. The tunnel seemed endless, a stone serpent. Elias consulted the map mentally. The corridor narrowed, forcing him to turn the cart sideways. Sweat ran down his forehead, mingling with silent tears. Suddenly, the torch revealed something unexpected. A stone wall, different from the others, with an almost erased inscription. It wasn't a passage from the diary, but a hidden door, masterfully camouflaged. Elias stopped, his heart pounding. The diary spoke of secrets, but not this one. Curiosity and apprehension. He touched the cold stone, feeling the grooves of the symbol, which emanated protection. He looked at Tomé and Lucas, asleep. The main path, arduous. This new door. What would it hold? Dangers or help? Time was an enemy, but something compelled him to investigate. He felt an intuition. That door was essential. With a trembling hand, Elias pushed the stone. It yielded with a low, dragging creak, revealing a small, dark niche. The torch illuminated the interior, and Elias's eyes widened. No traps or treasures. Something made his heart race. A wooden box, a leather canteen, and a cloth bundle. The air in the niche was fresh, with an aroma of herbs. Carefully, he picked up the box. It was sealed. Upon opening it, he found instruments and vials of medicine. It wasn't gold, but a first aid kit from past eras. The diary didn't mention this. Relief and astonishment overcame him. Providence? He took the canteen of fresh water, dry bread, and cured cheese. Food, water, medicine. An unexpected gift. Elias pressed the items against his chest, a tear tracing a path down his face. Hope turned into a strong flame. The journey, long and dangerous, now had better chances. The promise for Tomé and Lucas seemed real. Quickly, he had a greater chance. With hands still trembling, Elias hurried back to the cart. The flickering torch illuminated his weathered face. Now, with a glow of relief and renewed determination, He knelt beside his grandsons, who remained asleep, their fragile bodies wrapped in the dusty blankets. With the leather canteen, he opened the lid and smelled the fresh water. It was a blessing. First, he offered some to Lucas, who coughed weakly. Carefully, he moistened the boy's lips, and Lucas, almost instinctively, swallowed a small sip. Then he did the same with Tomei, who also drank with difficulty. Elias watched, his heart heavy, but now with a hint of optimism. Next, he took the dry bread and cured cheese. He broke off small pieces and with patience offered them to the boys. Lucas, with visible effort, managed to chew a little of the bread, and the cheese, though hard, seemed to give him some energy. Tomei, more awake, managed to eat a little more, his clouded eyes fixing on his grandfather with silent gratitude. Elias felt a warmth spread through his chest. Those small gestures were immense victories. He then opened the wooden box, revealing the ancient vials and instruments. Cautiously, he examined the almost illegible labels. One of the vials contained an herbal ointment with a soft, earthy aroma, described as a balm for fevers and pains. With gentle fingers, Elias took some of the ointment and spread it on Lucas's forehead, then on Tomei's, massaging gently. The hope that those ancient remedies could bring some relief was a balm for his own soul. The fresh air and herbal aroma of the niche seemed to have purified the environment, and Elias felt a light breeze, different from the stagnant air of the tunnel. He wondered about the origin of that place, that unexpected gift. It wasn't just a storage room, but a sanctuary of provisions, a gift from past generations, perhaps from someone who had also faced difficult times within those walls. The castle, which once appeared only as a cold and relentless prison, now revealed a face of mystery and, surprisingly, of care. Elias sat beside the cart, leaning his back against the cold wall. The torch, now weaker, continued to illuminate the small space. He picked up the diary and maps again. With the new food, water, and medicine, the journey seemed less desperate. He could allow himself a brief rest, a moment for the boys to absorb the small doses of food and medicine. Lucas's fever seemed to have slightly decreased, and Tomei was breathing with less difficulty. They were small, almost imperceptible signs, but for Elias, they were miracles. He traced the route on the map again, now with a different perspective. The secret passages were still a challenge, but the prospect of having resources to face the journey was an immense relief. The fertile field and the thermal spring were no longer just a distant promise, but a tangible, achievable destination. The intuition that had led him to that secret door had been a voice of hope, a whisper of destiny. Elias felt a deep connection with those who had hidden the provisions, a sense that he was not alone in his struggle. That castle, once a symbol of misfortune, was transforming into a silent ally, a guardian of secrets now revealing themselves to save his family. He looked at his grandsons, their faces pale, but now with a slight flush, a sign of life that filled him with overwhelming tenderness. He loved them more than life itself, and would do the impossible to see them well. With a sigh, Elias closed his eyes for an instant, allowing himself to feel the profound gratitude that overwhelmed him. He didn't know what the future held for them, but he knew that, with faith and love, they would overcome any obstacle. The journey would continue, but now the darkness of the tunnel seemed less threatening, and the light of hope, brighter than ever, guided his steps. He stood up, the pain in his bones still present, but his spirit unshakable. It was time to move forward with the certainty that Providence had smiled upon them. Elias stood up, pain in his bones, but his spirit unshakable. It was time to move forward, Providence by his side. With a sigh of age and determination, he gripped the cart's handle. The creak of the wheels, once despair, was now progress. pulling Tomei and Lucas into the secret passages. The torch, rekindled with cloth and oil, cast a trembling, steady light. The air, damp and heavy, seemed less oppressive, perhaps because of the hope blossoming in his chest. Every step tested his endurance. The tunnel narrowed, forcing Elias to maneuver the cart cautiously, scraping the wood against the stones. His shoulders ached. Muscles protested, but the image of his grandsons nestled in the blankets was a balm. He paused, adjusting blankets, checking the boys' breathing, whispering, "Almost there, my little ones." Lucas was breathing more easily, and Tomei, pale, had an imperceptible flush. The ointment, water, and food seemed to be taking effect. The diary mentioned the alternative exit as a longer, less exposed path, ideal for the fragile. Elias knew the journey would be arduous, but faith propelled him. He found a section with a low ceiling, bending down, almost crawling as he pulled the cart. Sweat ran down his wrinkled forehead, mingling with silent tears of love and gratitude for the chance given. Suddenly, the ground became steeper. A gentle descent made the cart gain speed. Elias had to use all his strength to brake, bracing his feet on the uneven ground. His arms trembled, fearing he would lose control. "Hold on, my angels!" he gasped. The boys, awake, looked at him with confidence, which gave Elias new energy. He controlled the cart until the flat stretch. Immense relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. Ahead, the torch revealed a narrow crack in the wall, almost imperceptible, the last passage before the exit. It was so narrow that the cart wouldn't fit. Elias felt a knot in his throat. He would have to carry the boys one by one. Leaving the cart, his salvation, pained his heart, but his grandson's safety was paramount. He knelt, exhausted, and picked up Lucas, nestling him. The boy was light, but Elias's weakness made the weight almost unbearable. With a last look at the cart, a silent promise that he would return, Elias squeezed into the crack, his body brushing against the stones. Lucas, eyes closed, breathed calmly against his chest. The passage was short, total darkness. The torch, left with Tomei. Elias emerged into a recess, where a faint light filtered through a crack in the ceiling, a sign of the outside. He laid Lucas on the blankets and returned to fetch Tomei, his heart pounding with the urgency of time and the proximity of freedom. Hope became tangible, a future that, once a distant whisper, now revealed itself as a new and glorious dawn. Elias squeezed back into the narrow crack, his body brushing against the stones. Every muscle protested, but the image of Tomei, alone in the darkness, propelled him. He dragged himself back, calling his grandson in a hoarse whisper. "Tomei, my little one, Grandpa is here." The torch flickered, illuminating the boy's pale face, who waited for him with wide eyes. Elias knelt with difficulty, embracing Tomei with tenderness. "Come on, my brave one, it's your turn." With Herculean effort, Elias lifted Tomei, nestling him against his chest. The boy, though light, felt heavy. The smell of sweat, earth, and herbal ointment mingled. Elias looked at the abandoned cart, a pang in his heart. It was a symbol of his journey, but his grandson's freedom was paramount. He promised he would return. With Tomei secure, Elias turned and with the torch squeezed through the crack. The stones scraped his clothes and skin, but he didn't feel the pain. Only the lives of his grandsons pulsating. Finally, he emerged into the recess where Lucas awaited him, wrapped in blankets. The crack in the ceiling, once a point of light, now seemed like a portal. It was the light from outside, a sign that the castle's darkness was about to be overcome. Elias laid Tomei beside Lucas, adjusting the blankets. The boys, weak, had a different sparkle in their eyes. The water, bread, and ointment had offered crucial relief. Elias sat between them, caressing their feverish foreheads, feeling the heat subside. Gratitude flooded him. He picked up the diary and maps, unfolding them. The faint light from the crack barely illuminated the writings, but Elias already knew the way. The final passage, a steep climb and shorter tunnel, would require one last burst of strength. The diary described it as the Path of Dawn, a name that resonated with mystical promise. "My angels," Elias whispered, his voice choked. "We are very close. The sun awaits us." He pointed to the crack, and the boys raised their eyes to the light. A faint smile appeared on Tomé's lips, and Lucas, with a sigh, extended a fragile little hand, as if wanting to touch hope. Elias held his grandson's hand tightly, leaving the cart weighed heavily on him, but it was the only way. He would have to carry both, one at a time or one in each arm, in a final display of love and sacrifice. The torch, almost at its end, cast its last flames. There was no time. The illness tried to resume its siege. With a deep sigh, Elias prepared for the last challenge. It would be the peak of his endurance. But the sight of his grandsons, the promise of the healing spring and the fertile field, was an inexhaustible engine. He would protect them, lead them to the light, no matter the cost. A silent oath etched into every beat of his heart. He stood up, the torch in one hand, the other extended. "Come on, my little ones. It's time to see the sun again." With this promise, Elias turned to the last passage, the Path of Dawn, with the faith that the castle's darkness was behind them, and a new dawn awaited his grandsons. Elias knelt again, his heart heavy with the decision. He looked at Tomé and Lucas, nestled in the blankets, their pale faces illuminated by the almost extinguished torch. The passage ahead, the Path of Dawn, was narrow and steep. Making 2 trips, a final sacrifice of his last strength, was the only option. "Grandpa will be right back, my angels," he whispered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Carefully, he lifted Lucas, the most fragile, nestling him against his chest. The boy was light as a feather, but every gram felt like an immense burden to Elias's aching muscles. He adjusted the blanket, feeling the faint warmth of Lucas's body. With the torch in his free hand, Elias turned and began to climb the Path of Dawn. The passage was even tighter, forcing him to bend and squeeze between the damp stones. Every step was a struggle against gravity and his own weakness. His heart pounded erratically and sweat ran down his wrinkled forehead. Lucas coughed weakly, and Elias held him tighter, whispering words of comfort and promises of sun and healing. The torch's light, weak and dying, barely illuminated the way, but Elias felt the fresh breeze from above, a vibrant harbinger of the outside world. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Elias saw a larger crack from which golden light streamed. It was the sun. With one last, desperate effort, he dragged himself out of the passage, emerging onto a small, rocky terrace hidden by bushes and ivy. The pure, fresh air filled his lungs. He carefully laid Lucas on the blankets, adjusting them to protect him from the gentle wind. The morning sun, still low on the horizon, painted the sky with shades of pink and orange, and its warm rays fell upon Lucas's pale face, who opened his eyes, revealing a sparkle of surprise and admiration. "The sun, Grandpa," Lucas whispered, his voice stronger. Elias smiled, tears streaming freely. "Yes, my angel, the sun." But there was no time for contemplation. Tomé was still in the darkness. With a racing heart, Elias turned and, with the almost extinguished torch, plunged back into the crack. The descent was easier, but urgency consumed him. He found Tomé huddled in the blankets, his eyes wide with fear, but with a flicker of hope and relief upon seeing him. "Grandpa's back, my brave one," Elias assured, embracing his grandson. With the same tenderness and superhuman effort, Elias lifted Tomé, nestling him against his chest. The boy was a little heavier, and Elias felt his knees buckle. The torch, now just a wisp of smoke, coughed one last time, and went out completely. Fear tried to settle in, but Elias pushed it back. He knew the way, and the sunlight awaited him. He climbed step by step, guided only by intuition and unwavering love for his grandsons. The stones scraped his skin, but he didn't feel the pain. He felt only Tomé's heart beating against his own, a fragile rhythm, but one that pulsed with vital constancy. Finally, the golden light appeared again. With one last push, Elias emerged from the path of dawn, carrying Tomé in his arms. The boy blinked, his eyes adjusting to the brightness. Elias laid him beside Lucas, who raised his little hand and smiled weakly at his brother. The two boys were there under the sun, safe from the castle's shadows. Elias felt an immense weight lifted from his shoulders. He knelt between them, his trembling, aged hands caressing their fine hair. That was the true treasure, the promise fulfilled. The castle, once a cold tomb, was now the door to a new world of possibilities. Ahead, a vast, verdant landscape stretched out, bathed in the golden morning light, and the promise of the healing spring and the fertile field seemed more real, more tangible than ever. The journey was far from over, but the darkness was behind them. Elias, kneeling between Tomé and Lucas, felt the sun warm his wrinkled skin. The castle's darkness was behind them, but the journey, he knew, continued. Ahead, a divine landscape unfolded, gentle hills, vibrant green, under a cloudless blue sky. The air, once dense, was now light, scented with wet earth and wildflowers. A stream murmured, and leafy trees swayed in the breeze. Lucas, with wide eyes of admiration, reached out his little hand to the sun. Tomé, calmer, watched the horizon with curiosity, a faint smile on his pale lips. Elias watched his grandsons, his heart overflowing with emotion. They were alive under the sun. The promise was fulfilled, a miracle. With effort, Elias stood up, his knees cracking. Physical pain was a whisper compared to the joy that overwhelmed him. He picked up the diary and maps, unfolding them. The map detailed the path to the thermal spring and the fertile field. They weren't far. An almost invisible trail snaked through the grass, indicating the direction. It was a challenging path, but it promised a destination of healing. Elias felt the exhaustion. Adrenaline subsided, muscles screamed for rest, hunger returned. How would he take the fragile boys along the trail? The spring was near, but the distance seemed like an abyss to his tired body. He looked at his grandsons, now more alert, absorbing the new world. Lucas's fever had subsided, and Tomé was breathing regularly, a sign of life. Suddenly, an almost inaudible sound broke the morning silence, a soft, distant, unmistakable song. Elias raised his head, eyes half closed. It wasn't wind nor a stream. It was a human voice followed by others. A simple choir, an ancient and familiar melody spoke of work, harvest, and the joy of living. Elias's heart leaped. He was not alone. The diary's promise of a fertile field and healing spring wasn't just for them. There were others who perhaps had also found refuge and hope there. He knelt, not from exhaustion, but from a sudden weakness of emotion. Tears rolled down, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief, a profound gratitude. Tomé and Lucas, noticing the change in their grandfather, looked at him with concern. Elias smiled, a wide and genuine smile. "Are you listening, my angels?" he whispered, pointing to the sound. "We are not alone. There are people. They will help us find the spring and build our new home." The boys, without fully understanding, felt the joy and hope in their grandfather's voice. Lucas, with effort, stood up, his eyes shining with a new light. Tomé nodded, a spark of adventure in his gaze. Elias embraced them, feeling life pulse in their small bodies. That was the climax. Not the arrival at the spring, but hope and human connection awaited them. The castle's darkness had been overcome. The light of community and solidarity began to shine. The Castle of Shadows, from a tomb, became the cradle of a new community, a beacon of hope for all who dared to dream. The chorus of voices intensified, a melody woven with the rays of the morning sun. Elias, still kneeling, rose with new urgency, his weariness forgotten. He needed to find these people for Tomei and Lucas. With a gentle gesture, he indicated the direction of the sound to the boys. "Wait here, my angels. Grandpa will go see who's there." He didn't want to scare them, but hope was too strong a magnet. With hesitant steps, Elias advanced along the invisible trail, his heart pounding. With each meter, the song grew clearer, and he distinguished words from an ancient song about the earth and sharing. Suddenly, the trail opened into a clearing. There, under the golden sunlight, a small group of people worked in a verdant field, their hands busy with the harvest. They were men and women, some young, others with grey hair like his own, but all with a sparkle of purpose in their eyes. They wore simple, clean clothes, and their faces radiated serenity. Upon seeing him, a robust man with a welcoming smile stopped his work and approached. "Good morning, traveler. It seems the Castle of Shadows has decided to reveal another of its secrets." His voice was gentle. Elias, surprised by the warm reception, felt the words catch in his throat. I am Elias, and I brought my grandsons. They are sick and hungry." Emotion choked him. The man who introduced himself as Samuel, the leader of that community, nodded. "We knew that one day someone would come this way. The ancient diary spoke of a promise, of a pure heart that would find the truth. Come, bring your little ones. We have the spring and we have bread for everyone." Samuel extended his hand, a gesture of pure solidarity. Elias ran back to his grandsons, his eyes moist. "Come, my angels, we are not alone. There are good people, and they are waiting for us." With the help of Samuel, who carried Lucas, and a kind woman named Anna, who took Tomei in her arms, they headed to the heart of the community. The sight of the thermal spring was even more impressive than the diary described, a natural pool of crystal-clear steaming waters surrounded by moss-covered stones and vibrant flowers. Carefully, Elias and Anna immersed the boys in the warm waters. The relief was almost instant. Lucas sighed, a sound of pure contentment, and Tomei relaxed, his fragile body absorbing the healing warmth. The fever began to subside, and the flush on their pale faces became a sign of health. The community, formed by descendants of families who had taken refuge there centuries ago, lived in harmony, cultivating the land and caring for the spring, keeping the legend alive. They offered Elias and the boys a place to live, a small, cozy cabin near the spring, and abundant food. In the days that followed, the transformation was miraculous. The spring waters and the nourishment of fresh, abundant food worked wonders. Lucas and Tomei regained their strength, their laughter echoing through the clearing. Elias, with a peaceful heart, helped with the harvest, sharing stories of the castle and learning about community life. He taught what he knew about the secret passages, and together they planned how to use the castle as a safe refuge for others who might need it. The Castle of Shadows, once a symbol of misfortune, was now a beacon of hope and a home for a community united by altruism and faith. Elias's loneliness dissolved, replaced by warm human connection. The boys were healed, hunger was a distant memory, and a new purpose blossomed. Life, once a Calvary, was now a garden of opportunities. Life in the community flourished like the wildflowers around the spring, and Elias, Tomei, and Lucas became an integral part of that new world. Days passed, marked by the gentle rhythm of fieldwork and the boys' joyful laughter. Lucas, once so fragile, now ran through the fields with Tomei, their faces tanned by the sun and their eyes shining with recovered vitality. Illness was a distant memory, and hunger a nightmare that would never recur. Elias watched his grandsons, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Sitting in front of his small cabin, he saw Samuel and Anna and the other community members interacting with the boys, teaching them the names of plants, the importance of harvest, and the joy of sharing. The loneliness that had bent him for so long completely dissolved, replaced by a sense of belonging and love that warmed his soul. Each morning, Elias helped in the field, his wrinkled hands finding new purpose in the fertile earth. He shared his stories of the Castle of Shadows, and the community listened with fascination. Together, they began to explore the secret passages Elias had discovered, no longer as tunnels of despair, but as paths to a future. Elias's knowledge of the castle was invaluable. He showed them how to reinforce certain areas, how to use the safest chambers to store supplies, and how the cracks could be used for ventilation and natural light. The idea of transforming the castle into a refuge for others, a promise of a home for those who, like them, had lost everything, began to take shape. It would no longer be the Castle of Shadows, but rather the Castle of Hope. The community, inspired by Elias's resilience and the purity of his love for his grandsons, embraced the vision. They knew there were many others out there, wandering aimlessly, needing a safe haven. One day, while watching Tomei and Lucas playing near the spring, Elias felt a profound peace. Lucas, with a mischievous smile, threw a small stone into the water, and Tomei laughed, his sound echoing softly. Elias remembered the day he found them, wasting away, and the pain in his chest transformed into a gentle warmth. He had promised a new home, a sanctuary, and he had delivered. Not in the way he expected, but in a much richer and more meaningful way. He stood up, his back a little less bent, his steps firmer. Samuel approached, a friendly smile on his face. "Elias, the castle is taking on a new life. Your faith and courage have shown us the way." Elias merely nodded, his eyes moist. "It wasn't just my faith, Samuel. It was all of ours. Faith in human kindness, in sharing, in the love that unites us." That late afternoon, with the sun setting and painting the sky with vibrant hues, Elias sat with Tomei and Lucas in his arms, watching the stars begin to dot the sky. The Castle of Shadows, now visible in the distance, seemed to glow under the moonlight, a beacon of hope. It was no longer a place of legends of misfortune, but a testament to the human capacity to overcome adversity, to find light in darkness, and to build a future of love and purpose, one brick at a time. The journey had been long and arduous, but the destination was a garden of opportunities, cultivated by faith, altruism, and unwavering human connection. Elias smiled, the smile of someone who had finally found his place in the world. Elias smiled, the smile of someone who had finally found his place in the world. Days unfolded into weeks, and weeks into months, weaving a new tapestry of life in the clearing and the ancient Castle of Shadows. What was once an improvised refuge for Elias and his grandsons now flourished as a true home, a sanctuary for many. With Samuel's wise leadership and Elias's invaluable guidance, the community worked tirelessly. The castle's secret passages, once paths of escape and despair, were mapped and transformed into safe routes for transporting supplies and for exploration. The damp, dark chambers, with time and collective effort, gained the warmth of lit fireplaces and the light of widened cracks, which now framed stunning views of the fertile field. The central courtyard, once covered in rubble, was cleared and became a vibrant gathering place, where children played and adults shared stories and laughter. Tomei and Lucas, now robust boys full of life, were living proof of the transformation. Their faces, once pale and marked by illness, now displayed a healthy glow, tanned by the sun and animated by joy. They ran through the fields, helped with the harvest, and learned from Samuel and Anna the secrets of the earth and the art of caring for the spring. Elias watched them, his heart overflowing with a gratitude that words could barely express. His grandsons not only survived, they thrived, rooted in a community that loved them. News of the Castle of Hope, as the community affectionately renamed it, spread beyond the hills. Tired travelers, displaced families and lost souls, drawn by legends of a place where hope flourished, began to arrive. Elias, with his white hair and eyes that held the memory of a difficult past, became the guardian of stories, the wise counselor. He sat by the fire, narrating the journey, the discovery of the chest, the fight against illness, and the providence of the spring and the field. His words, laden with emotion, inspired faith and courage in each new member. Justice for Elias was not just the absence of pain, but the presence of opportunity. He and Samuel worked to create a system where everyone had a role, where work was shared, and the harvest was distributed equitably. No one went hungry, no one felt alone. Human connection was the foundation of everything, an unbreakable bond that united them in purpose. One late afternoon, Elias sat on a stone bench in the castle courtyard, watching the sun set. Tomei and Lucas approached, each bringing him a wildflower. Lucas, with a gap-toothed smile, extended his. "For you, Grandpa." Tomei, more reserved, simply leaned his head on his grandfather's shoulder. Elias embraced them, feeling the warmth of their small bodies. The triumph was not just his, it was everyone's. The Castle of Shadows was a name that belonged to the past. Now, it was the Castle of Hope, a living monument to a grandfather's unwavering faith and the transformative power of human connection, a beacon that with each new dawn promised a future of love, purpose, and community for all who dared to dream.